The night was ancient. In the quiet of the moonlit sands, where the wind whispered secrets from the distant corners of the earth, a shadow moved silently across the great city of Alexandria. It was a shadow unlike any other. Its shape was not easily defined, as if it were born from the very heart of the stars, slipping through the cracks of time itself. Few had seen it, fewer still had understood it, but those who had spoken of it called it the whisper of the library. Hello, my friend. Welcome to tonight's sleep story. My name is Elias, and it's my pleasure to guide you into a peaceful night's rest. A mysterious presence, elusive yet undeniably present. It was said to be the soul of the Great Library of Alexandria itself, lingering in the air long after the scrolls had burned, long after the knowledge had been lost. They said the library never truly vanished. It simply waited deep beneath the sands, watching, breathing, remembering. Shh. The voice was soft, soothing, as if a gentle hand was placed upon your forehead, guiding you deeper into the folds of silence. Relax. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on the river. The world outside fades. With every word, your mind grew lighter, calmer, as if a weight was slowly lifting from your shoulders. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the earth, as if you were lying on the soft sands of Alexandria itself. Feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, the cool touch of the evening breeze as the stars begin to appear, one by one. Breathe deeply and slowly. In through the nose, filling the lungs, and then gently out through the mouth, releasing any lingering tension. Let it go. Feel the muscles in your body soften and loosen, from the tips of your toes all the way up to the top of your head. Let each breath carry away the stress of the day, the worries that still cling to your mind like cobwebs. With each exhale, imagine the world growing quieter, more still. The sound of the wind outside grows more distant, like a gentle lullaby carried by the sea breeze. In and out. Imagine now, the voice continued, its tone calm and steady. You are walking through the heart of Alexandria, a city of great wonders, where the streets hum with ancient knowledge. The air is thick with stories, each corner waiting to be discovered. You are here in this timeless city. There is no rush, no urgency, only the soft rhythm of the world moving around you, whispering tales long forgotten. The voice guided you deeper, deeper still, until all that existed was the peaceful darkness of the mind, cradling you like a child in the arms of the night. As you drifted into this deep tranquility, a new presence began to emerge, subtle at first, like the flickering of a distant candle in a vast hall. The soft echo of footsteps, so faint that they seemed more like a memory than a sound, reverberated through the deep spaces of the mind. The footsteps quickened. It was as if you were there, walking alongside this shadowy figure in a place that no longer existed in the waking world. You could sense their presence, could feel their eyes flickering across the shelves of forgotten knowledge, where the pages of ancient scrolls seemed to shimmer with the weight of 1,000 secrets. And then, as the soft, reassuring rhythm of your breathing began to settle into something like stillness, a voice, distant but clear, whispered from the dark. "Welcome," it said. "Welcome to the library." The words were simple, but in them lay a promise, an invitation to something that had not been seen in centuries, perhaps longer. And as the shadows around you seemed to move ever so slightly, the very air hummed with the sensation of something alive, something ancient, watching. You felt a sense of wonder, but also a faint shiver, both excitement and fear, as if the story you were about to hear had the power to change everything. A story that began not long after the Great Library of Alexandria was founded, when knowledge and wisdom were the most precious treasures on earth. The sound of the waves crashing gently on the shore echoed across the city, blending with the night air. Alexandria's harbor was a sight to behold. Ships from distant lands, their sails billowing in the winds, bearing goods, stories, and ideas that would shape the course of history. In the heart of the city stood the Great Library, towering above the streets like a guardian of secrets its marble columns gleaming in the moonlight. The structure was unlike any other, a blend of grandeur and mystery, an eternal symbol of knowledge, a place where men and women from all corners of the world gathered to learn, to share, to preserve. But it was not just a library. It was something far more than that. Here, the story truly began. The library was alive in ways that most could not understand. It pulsed with energy, a beating heart at the center of the world's knowledge. To be inside it was to feel the weight of all that had come before and all that was yet to come. The scrolls were more than ink on parchment. They were the lifeblood of the world, each containing a piece of history, a fragment of truth, a piece of a puzzle that, once completed, would reveal the secrets of the universe. In the quiet corridors of this grand institution, a young woman named Callista wandered. Her hair, dark as the midnight sky, framed her face like a silken veil. Her eyes, wide and searching, gleamed with the curiosity of one who had spent her life in pursuit of something just out of reach. For Callista, the library was not simply a place of study. It was home. Her father, a scholar of some repute, had been one of the library's greatest custodians. He had taught her to read and write before she could even walk. He had instilled in her a deep reverence for knowledge, a belief that every word, every symbol, every text had a story to tell, a truth to uncover. But there was something more, something her father had never spoken of, something that seemed to pulse in the very walls of the library itself. Callista had long suspected that there were scrolls hidden deep within the library that contained knowledge far beyond anything the world had ever seen. Ancient scrolls, dangerous scrolls that could change the course of history, and she was determined to find them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city bathed in the soft glow of twilight, Callista found herself standing before a secret door, one she had discovered in the hidden archives, a place few knew existed. The door was old, its wood warped and cracked with age, but the intricate carvings that adorned it still held their beauty. Symbols, ancient cryptic symbols, were etched into the surface, telling a story of their own. Callista's fingers brushed lightly across them, feeling the hum of energy beneath her fingertips. It was as if the door itself was alive, waiting for her to unlock it. She had come this far. Now, there was no turning back. With a deep breath, Callista pushed open the door, the hinges creaking in protest as it revealed a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness below. The air was thick with the scent of dust and old parchment. As she descended into the depths, the faintest flicker of light seemed to dance along the stone walls, like the flicker of a candle, long extinguished but never fully gone. At the bottom of the stairs, the darkness seemed to thicken. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she stepped into the forgotten chamber, a place that had not seen the light of day for centuries. She was not alone. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind her. The door slammed shut behind Callista with a resounding echo, as if the very air had folded in on itself, trapping her in the forgotten chamber. A moment passed, and the weight of the silence settled around her like a thick, unseen veil. Her heart thudded in her chest, each beat a reminder that she had crossed a threshold that could never be undone. She turned back to the door, her fingers brushing against the cold stone, but the handle had vanished. The door had no hinges, no visible way to open. It was as if it had never existed at all, merely an illusion designed to lure her deeper into the labyrinth of secrets hidden beneath the library. The chamber was dim, lit only by the faint flicker of her lantern. The air was thick with dust, each breath heavy with the weight of centuries. The walls, once smooth, were now rough with age, cracked and crumbling in places. The faint smell of parchment and ink clung to the air like a memory of times long past. Callista took a step forward, her footsteps muffled by the layers of dust on the floor. She hesitated for a moment, but the pull of the unknown was too strong. With each step, her senses heightened, her anticipation growing. She had always known the library held secrets, hidden knowledge, scrolls of power, but she had never imagined it would lead her here, to a place so far beneath the surface, so far beyond the reach of ordinary scholars. She continued down the narrow passage, the flickering lantern casting shadows that danced along the walls, creating fleeting shapes that seemed to watch her as she moved. The air grew colder, and the silence seemed to deepen, stretching out like an eternity. There were no sounds of the city above, no voices, no footsteps, just the soft rustle of her own breath and the occasional creak of the old stone beneath her feet. At the end of the corridor, she reached a large chamber. The walls of the room stretched high, far beyond the reach of her lantern's light. The ceiling was lost in the darkness, an abyss of shadow that seemed to swallow the very air. And in the center of the room, rising out of the floor like some ancient relic, stood a pedestal, a single stone structure carved with symbols so intricate they seemed to pulse with energy. Her breath caught in her throat. This was it, the heart of the library's secrets. As Callista approached the pedestal, she felt the pull of something greater than her own curiosity. There was power here, old power, ancient power, and it called to her, beckoning her to uncover its mysteries. The symbols on the pedestal seemed to shift and change as she drew nearer, forming words she could not quite understand. But there was something deeply familiar about them, something that resonated deep within her. Her fingers trembled as she reached out to touch the stone. The moment her skin made contact, the room seemed to come alive. The walls trembled as if waking from a long slumber, and the air crackled with energy. The symbols on the pedestal glowed faintly, casting an eerie light across the chamber. Then slowly, the stone began to slide apart, revealing a hidden compartment within. Inside was a scroll. No, not just any scroll. This was something far older, far more important. Callista's pulse quickened as she reached for it, but before she could grasp the ancient parchment, a voice echoed through the chamber, low, guttural, and impossibly old. "Do not touch it." The voice was not human. It was the sound of something ancient, something older than the library itself. The words reverberated through her bones, causing her to freeze. Her fingers hovered above the scroll, trembling, but she could not look away. "It is not meant for you." The voice was no longer just a whisper. It surrounded her, pressing in on all sides. The very air seemed to shimmer with the power of it. For a moment, Callista hesitated. She had always known there were forces in this world far greater than her understanding, forces that no mortal should tamper with. But this was the key to everything. The scroll could reveal the hidden history of the world, the forgotten knowledge that could change the course of civilization itself. And yet, she heard the voice again, this time more urgent, more desperate. Leave this place, child. You have no idea what you are awakening. Callista's heart raced, but her curiosity, that insatiable hunger for knowledge, urged her forward. She couldn't turn away now, not when she was so close. Not when everything she had ever sought was right within her reach. With a trembling breath, she tore her gaze away from the scroll and glanced around the room. There was no sign of the source of the voice, no figure standing in the shadows. But the air had shifted, become heavier, more oppressive. Then a shadow flickered across the far wall. Callista spun around, her lantern held high, casting long, wavering shadows across the chamber. The room seemed to stretch and shift in response, its walls groaning as if in protest. From the darkness at the edge of the room, something moved. A figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in robes of black, its face hidden beneath a hood. The figure was tall, impossibly tall, and it moved with a fluidity that was almost otherworldly. The lantern's light flickered as the figure stepped forward, its presence casting an unnatural chill across the chamber. For a moment, Callista stood frozen, caught between flight and the pull of the knowledge she had come to find. But the figure did not advance, did not speak. It merely stood, watching her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Who are you?" Callista managed to ask, her voice trembling. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering her words. Then, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, it replied, "I am the keeper of this place." The words echoed, reverberating in the walls, like the sound of 1,000 whispers. Callista could feel the weight of them, the truth behind them, the keeper of the forgotten chamber, the guardian of the ancient secrets. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. "I need to know what's in the scroll," she said, her voice firmer now, despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. It could change everything. It could save the world. The figure's gaze seemed to pierce through her, as though it could see into her very soul. "You do not understand the cost of what you seek." A sudden rush of wind swept through the chamber, though there was no source for it. The walls seemed to pulse as if alive, and the shadows in the corners of the room grew deeper, darker. Callista felt the weight of the figure's words settle on her like a warning, but she could not turn back. Not now. Not when she was so close. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have to know." The figure did not respond immediately. Instead, it raised its hand, and the shadows in the room seemed to shift. The walls groaned again, and from the depths of the chamber came the sound of something shifting, something large, something ancient, as if the room itself was awakening. And then, in the flickering light of the lantern, Callista saw it. The floor beneath her feet cracked open, and from the depths below rose a massive stone staircase, its steps carved with the same intricate symbols that adorn the pedestal. The air hummed with energy, the very ground vibrating beneath her. The keeper did not move. It merely watched as the staircase emerged, a path leading deeper into the forgotten chambers beneath the library. "You seek knowledge," the figure said, its voice quieter now, almost sad. "But know this, the deeper you go, the harder it becomes to return." Callista felt the pull of the staircase, a compulsion to follow the path that had been revealed. She knew she had no choice now. The scroll, the secrets, the power, it all lay ahead. But she could not shake the feeling that something dark and ancient had been stirred, something that had been waiting for centuries to be awakened. With one last glance at the figure, Callista took a step forward, and the shadows closed in behind her. The shadows closed in behind Callista as she stepped onto the stone staircase, the ancient steps groaning under her weight. The air grew heavier, thicker, as if the very earth was holding its breath. Every part of her being screamed at her to turn back, to escape the pull of the unknown, to flee from whatever had been awakened below. But she could not. The allure of the knowledge that lay ahead, of the secrets buried beneath the library for centuries, was too great. As she descended, the flickering lantern cast long shadows on the walls, which seemed to stretch farther than the eye could see. The carvings on the stone staircase were far more intricate than those in the chamber above, their symbols unfamiliar, foreign. Yet, As her fingers brushed against the cool surface, they seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, as if the very walls of the library were alive, breathing with the weight of ancient wisdom. Each step she took brought her further into the heart of the library, a place where time itself seemed to distort. Above her, the echoes of the library's upper chambers were nothing more than a distant memory, and the sounds of the city, the bustling streets, and the endless rhythm of Alexandria faded into a silence that pressed down on her chest. There was no going back. The deep, dark staircase offered no retreat. The air grew colder still as she descended, and a low, distant hum filled the space around her. It was a sound like no other, an ancient, resonating vibration that seemed to echo from the very foundation of the earth. The walls of the stairwell narrowed with every step, the space constricting, as though the staircase itself was leading her into the heart of something far older than the library, something that had been waiting for centuries. And then, just as Callista thought the staircase might never end, it did. The final step beneath her foot crumbled with a sharp crack, and she stumbled forward into the heart of the forgotten chamber. The room that awaited her was vast, far larger than she had anticipated. Its ceilings soared high above, lost in shadows, and its walls stretched out in all directions, covered with layers of dust and age. The room smelled of ancient parchment, of ink, of time itself. And at its center was a stone table, larger than any she had ever seen in the library. It was etched with the same cryptic symbols, each one glowing faintly with an ethereal light. Callista's heart skipped a beat as she approached it. This was it, the place where the greatest secrets of the world were meant to be revealed. As she moved closer to the table, her eyes caught sight of the thing she had come to find, a scroll resting atop the stone surface. But this was no ordinary scroll. Unlike the others in the library, this one was made from a dark material, almost black in color, with gold filigree running along its edges. The symbols on its surface shimmered like stars in a night sky, and the air around it seemed to hum with a quiet power, as though it were alive. Her fingers trembled as she reached out to touch it. The moment her skin made contact with the dark surface of the scroll, the room seemed to shift. The walls groaned, and the air pulsed with energy, as if something deep within the earth had been awakened. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and the stone table shuddered as if it were about to crack open. And then, without warning, the lantern flickered and went out. The darkness around her pressed in, smothering her. She could no longer see her own hand in front of her face, and the silence became deafening, as though the entire world had stopped breathing. Panic rose in her chest. She couldn't stay in the dark. She couldn't. But before she could react, a voice echoed through the chamber, low and ancient, its tone carrying the weight of centuries. "You have come far, child, but you do not yet understand the price." Callista froze, her breath caught in her throat. She knew that voice. It was the same voice she had heard in the chamber above, the one that had warned her away from the scroll, the one that had seemed to be everywhere at once. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling but defiant. "What is this place?" A soft sound, like the rustling of wind through dry leaves, filled the air around her. For a long moment, there was no reply. Then, slowly, the shadows seemed to shift, coalescing into a shape, a figure that stood in the center of the room. The figure was cloaked, its face hidden in shadow, but Callista could feel its presence, a weight pressing down on her. It was not human, she realized, but something else, something older. "I am the keeper of these secrets," the figure said, its voice like the deep rumble of the earth. "I have watched over this place for countless ages, guarding the knowledge that should never be uncovered." Callista's heart raced. She had come for this very knowledge, but now that she stood on the threshold of it, a sense of dread gripped her. What was it that the library had been hiding? What was this power, this force, that seemed to have been sealed away for so long? "What is the scroll?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What does it contain?" The figure moved closer, its presence growing more oppressive with each step it took. "The scroll is not meant for the living," it replied, its voice soft, almost sorrowful. "It contains the knowledge of the universe, the power to shape reality itself. But such knowledge comes at a cost. It is a burden that no mortal can bear." Callista's mind raced. The power to shape reality. She had come for this, She had long believed that there was something hidden in the library, something that could change everything. But now, in the face of this ancient guardian, the weight of what she sought began to sink in. "What happens if I take it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The figure's eyes, if they could be called that, seemed to pierce into her very soul. "You will awaken forces beyond your control, forces that will consume you, just as they have consumed others who have sought this knowledge before you." Callista took a step back, but her gaze was fixed on the scroll. The temptation, the hunger for knowledge, was too strong. She had to know. She had to understand. "I don't care about the cost," she said, her voice steady, though her hands shook. "I need to know the truth." The figure let out a sigh, a sound that was both ancient and weary. "Then you are lost," it said, its voice filled with sadness. "You are already too far gone to turn back." With that, the figure reached out, its hand sweeping through the air. The ground trembled again, and the shadows around Callista seemed to grow darker, more oppressive. But she did not move. She had come this far. The scroll, this ancient, forbidden knowledge, was within her grasp. As her fingers closed around the scroll, the world around her seemed to crack open. The room shook violently, and the air became thick with energy. A blinding light erupted from the scroll, filling the room with a brightness so intense that it seared into her eyes. Callista staggered back, her vision blurred by the light. And then the ground beneath her feet gave way. She screamed as she fell, the darkness swallowing her whole. The world around Callista spun as she fell, the darkness devouring her from all sides. For a moment, there was nothing, no sensation, no sound, no light, just the oppressive weight of the abyss closing in. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the rapid thumping an urgent reminder that she was still alive, still falling into the unknown. Her breath came in ragged gasps as the air whipped past her, and she reached out instinctively, her fingers grasping for something, anything, to break her descent. But there was nothing. She was plummeting through an endless void, falling further into the depths of the earth, the very ground beneath her shaking with a violent energy that seemed to come from the core of the world itself. Time stretched, warped, as though it had lost all meaning in this place. Her body felt weightless, as though gravity itself had been suspended, and yet she could feel the pull of something, a force deeper than the earth, more powerful than any force she had ever known. She could almost hear it now, a low rumbling sound reverberating through her bones like a deep primordial hum. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the falling stopped. Callista slammed into the ground with a brutal force, her body crumpling upon impact. Pain shot through her limbs, but the shock of the fall numbed her for a moment. She lay still, trying to catch her breath, the harsh silence of the place pressing down on her. When she finally opened her eyes, the world around her was no longer the dark, featureless void she had fallen through. Instead, she found herself in a cavernous space, vast and ancient, stretching out in every direction. The walls were smooth and black, but there were traces of something, faint, glowing veins of gold that crisscrossed the surface like ancient veins of energy, pulsing with an ethereal light. The air was thick, heavy with an unnatural weight, and she could feel the hum of the ancient power in the very atmosphere around her. Callista pushed herself up, her muscles protesting, but the sense of urgency that had driven her to this place kept her moving. She could hear her own breath, shallow and quick, in the oppressive silence. The chamber stretched on endlessly, the darkness too thick to see where it ended, yet the faint golden veins offered some semblance of light. She stood in the center of the chamber, taking in the vastness of it, her eyes scanning the surroundings, trying to make sense of this place, this chamber that had been hidden away for so long. The scroll, the knowledge she had sought, was still with her, tightly gripped in her hand. She could feel its weight, its power, calling to her. But now there was something else, something darker. A low sound echoed through the chamber, distant at first, but growing louder, closer. Callista froze. The noise was strange, almost like a voice, but not one she could understand. It resonated through the ground, vibrating up through her feet, and she could feel the very earth respond, as though something deep below was awakening. The air seemed to grow colder, the golden veins of light flickering as if struggling to stay lit. Callista's pulse quickened, She had to move, had to find some way to understand what was happening. She turned on her heel, her lantern held high, and for the first time noticed a faint glow in the distance. It was a doorway. No, a passage, carved into the rock at the far side of the cavern, its entrance framed by the same glowing symbols that adorn the scroll. The markings seemed to pulse and shift as though alive, calling to her. Without thinking, she started toward it, drawn by the inexplicable pull of the symbols. The closer she got, the more intense the humming sound became. It was no longer just a vibration through the floor. It was a symphony of voices, distant and hollow, as if they were speaking in unison, chanting in an ancient language she could not comprehend. The ground trembled beneath her feet as she approached the entrance, and she could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. When she reached the doorway, she hesitated for only a moment, the weight of the unknown pressing on her. But she had come this far. She had crossed into this place beneath the library, and she could not turn back now. With a deep breath, she stepped forward into the passage. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air shifted. The humming grew louder, the voices more distinct, though still indecipherable. The passage seemed to stretch out infinitely before her, twisting and turning in ways that made it impossible to know which direction she was truly going. The walls were smooth, but every so often she could see faint glimpses of markings, runes, symbols, or writing etched into the stone. But it wasn't the walls that held her attention. It was the figure ahead of her. The figure was cloaked, its face obscured by shadow. It stood motionless at the far end of the passage, waiting. Callista's heart skipped a beat. The figure was different from the one she had encountered earlier in the library. This one more tangible, more real, but just as ancient. There was a presence about it, something powerful and unsettling. The hum of the chamber seemed to focus entirely on the figure, as though it was the source of the very energy that had drawn Callista to this place. For a long moment, neither moved. The air seemed to hold its breath. Then the figure spoke, its voice deep and resonant, like the rumble of a storm on the horizon. You should not have come here. The words rang out through the passage, their weight settling around Callista like a heavy cloak. She wanted to speak, to to ask who this figure was, why it was here, but the words caught in her throat. There was something about the figure, its presence, that made her hesitate. "You seek knowledge," the figure continued, its tone both accusatory and sorrowful. "But there are things that should never be known. Some truths are too dangerous, too powerful. You are not meant to carry this burden." Callista's grip on the scroll tightened. "I have to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The world needs to know. This knowledge, it could change everything." The figure's head tilted slightly, as if it were studying her. "You think you understand, but you do not. There are powers in this world far greater than your comprehension. The knowledge you seek is not a gift. It is a curse." Callista stepped forward, her pulse racing. "What do you mean? What is it that I'm supposed to learn?" The figure's voice softened, its next words almost a sigh. "What you hold is the key to the end of all things. The scroll you carry is not meant for the living. It is the final record of a time long past, a time before even the gods themselves walked this earth. It holds the story of the first fall, the destruction of the old world, the beginning of all suffering." Callista felt a chill run down her spine. She had suspected there was something dark about this place, but this was far beyond what she had imagined. "The first fall?" she echoed, her voice trembling. "You mean the fall of the gods?" The figure nodded. "The fall of everything. The knowledge contained in that scroll is the story of the destruction of all things, of how the gods in their arrogance sought to control the very fabric of reality itself, and how they tore apart the world they had created. It is a tale of unimaginable power, and it is one that should never be told again." Callista's mind reeled as she tried to process the enormity of what the figure was saying. The gods, the fall of the old world, a power that could change everything. This was more than she had ever imagined, and yet the desire to understand it, to unlock its secrets, burned brighter than ever within her. "I need to know," she said again, this time more urgently. "I need to understand the truth." The figure raised its hand as though to stop her. "You do not understand. If you continue down this path, you will awaken something that has been dormant for eons, and when it wakes, there will be no going back." Callista could feel it, the pull of the scroll, the pull of the ancient knowledge. It was calling to her, beckoning her forward, urging her to take that final step. And yet, the figure's words lingered in the air, heavy with warning. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening, and then she stepped forward. The figure stood still in the center of the darkened passage, its presence more imposing than ever. Callista could feel the weight of its gaze, though she couldn't see its face. Her heart raced as the final words echoed in the air around her. You will awaken something that has been dormant for eons. And when it wakes, there will be no going back. Her fingers tightened around the scroll. The pull of the knowledge it contained was irresistible, stronger now than it had ever been. It was as if the very fabric of the universe itself was calling her to unveil its secrets, to lift the veil that had been obscuring the truth for centuries. But the figure, this ancient being, had warned her. She knew what would happen if she chose to press forward. Yet, she could not stop herself. The desire for understanding, for truth, burned in her chest. It was an ache, a longing, a hunger. In the deepest corners of her heart, she knew that to walk away now would mean never knowing the answers she had spent so many years searching for. She could feel the weight of the library, the vastness of its knowledge, pressing down on her, urging her to continue. This was her destiny. This was why she had come. With a steady breath, Callista stepped forward. The figure did not move to stop her. Instead, it merely observed, silent and still, as she crossed the threshold into the heart of the passage. The air around her thickened, swirling with ancient energy. As she moved deeper, the golden veins that had lit the cavernous space pulsed with an eerie, rhythmic glow, as if the walls themselves were alive. The passages twisted and turned in labyrinthine patterns, but still, Callista moved forward, guided by an unseen force, by a need to understand. The voices that had echoed through the chamber now faded, replaced by a low, resonant hum, a sound that vibrated through her very bones. The farther she went, the more oppressive the silence became. Each step she took seemed to echo louder, stretching the stillness in ways that made her uneasy. The passage grew narrower, the walls pressing closer, until it felt as if she were walking through the throat of some great sleeping beast. It was a place where time had no meaning, where the very air felt suspended in eternal waiting. And then, just when she thought the passage might stretch on forever, it ended. Before her stood a massive door, carved from the same dark stone that lined the walls of this place, but with a design unlike anything Callista had ever seen. The symbols were intricate and alien, interwoven in patterns that seemed to move, shift, and grow before her eyes, as though they were alive. The door itself seemed to hum, a low vibration that resonated deep within her chest, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. This was it, the final barrier. Callista reached for the scroll. She had been holding it in her hands so tightly, her fingers aching from the pressure, but she knew it had led her here. The knowledge she sought was beyond this door, hidden away for millennia, waiting to be revealed. With trembling hands, she placed the scroll against the door. For a moment, nothing happened. The hum of the symbols continued, and the air around her remained still, charged with anticipation. But then, slowly, the door began to respond. The symbols on its surface glowed brighter, their movement accelerating until they were a blur of light and shadow. Callista stepped back, watching in awe as the door started to shift and change before her very eyes. A crack appeared down the center of the door, and with a low rumble, it slowly began to open. The air that poured through the gap was thick and heavy, laden with the weight of history, of knowledge, of 1,000 forgotten truths. A faint light seeped through the opening, and Callista stepped forward, her breath shallow, her heart pounding. As the door swung open fully, Callista found herself standing at the threshold of the room beyond. It was unlike anything she could have imagined, a vast, circular chamber, its walls lined with shelves upon shelves of ancient scrolls, books, and artifacts, all bathed in a soft, golden light. The room was impossibly large, its ceiling lost in shadow, and at the center stood a stone pedestal upon which rested a single object. The object, the source of the knowledge she sought, was an ancient tome, bound in dark leather and inscribed with runes that glowed faintly in the dim light. It was surrounded by a soft, pulsing aura, and the air around it seemed to shimmer, as though reality itself was bending in its presence. Callista's eyes widened. This was it. This was the heart of the library, the final secret, the ultimate truth. She took a step forward, drawn irresistibly toward the pedestal. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to reach out, to claim the knowledge that awaited her. But as her fingers hovered over the tome, she felt a sudden coldness seep into her bones, an overwhelming sense of dread that froze her in place. A voice, low, familiar, rang out from the shadows behind her. You should not have come here. Callista turned quickly, her heart skipping a beat. The figure stood in the doorway, its form dark and indistinct against the faint light. But now there was something different about it. There was no anger in its voice, no accusation, only sadness. You have uncovered what was meant to remain hidden, the figure said, its tone gentle, yet heavy with sorrow. This knowledge is not yours to bear. It is a burden that no mortal can carry without consequence. Callista's heart raced, and she stepped back from the pedestal, her hands trembling. I have to know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I have to understand. This is the key to everything. The truth about the gods, about the fall. It's the final piece. I have to know. The figure sighed, a deep, mournful sound. The truth is not always what we think it is, Callista. Sometimes it is better to live in ignorance, to walk through life with the comfort of not knowing. Once you unlock this knowledge, you will no longer be the same. You will be bound to it forever. Her chest tightened, but she could not stop herself. She had come so far. The truth was within her grasp. She reached for the tome. The moment her fingers brushed the ancient leather, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and the golden light around the book flared violently. A blinding burst of energy shot up into the air, and for a moment, everything went white. And then the light faded, and the room was silent once more. Callista blinked, her vision still blurred, and when her senses returned, she found herself standing in the center of the chamber, the book now closed before her. The room was still, but the energy in the air had shifted. It was heavier now, charged with an intensity she could feel deep within her bones. The figure had disappeared. Callista stood alone in the chamber, the weight of the knowledge she had sought pressing down on her, its implications slowly sinking in. The truth was there, within the book, but she realized that the power it held was not just in the words, but in the choices it presented. She could open it, learn everything, and risk everything. Or she could walk away. In the end, Callista knew she had been right to seek the truth. But she also understood that some secrets were not meant to be uncovered. She could feel the weight of that decision settling over her, a burden she would carry for the rest of her life. With a final, long look at the book, Callista turned away. She had found the truth, but some mysteries were best left unanswered. Good night, sweet dreams. As the story of Callista's journey through the Library of Alexandria draws to a close, she leaves with the knowledge of her own journey, the choices she made, and the burden she now carries. The conclusion is both a resolution and a reflection on the cost of knowledge.
you.